Sometimes part of my work was sort of a liaison between the record company and corrido artists we had an interest in working with. This was one of those nights where I was roped into attending a club event. Normally, I'd rather be at home enjoying my evening with my family. Wifey made her famous tortas with everything on it, and I wasn't going to miss out. But here I am, close to 10 p.m. waiting outside the club. I pulled some strings to at least bring a friend. In my case, my younger broski. Tonight I had two goals: to secure an agreement with Adriel Favela's manager and make contact with the headliner's management. After some time, I finally got a message from a contact inside the club. Favela was making waves and the record company wanted to collaborate. His manager met us behind the club. He tells us to follow him. We make our way through a ring of security, walk up some dark stairway past groupies waiting by the green room. Inside are some members of the banda that will back the headliner that night, Alfredito Olivas. Favela's manager and I talk briefly about a possible collaboration on some future projects. Then the lights dim for a bit. Alfredo Olivas arrives, dressed in a norteño fit with a Sinaloa-style sombrero and his prized accordion. I briefly say hello to Alfredo, just one of countless people he interacts with that night. In a haze of smoke and liquor free-flowing all over the stage, he was focused and friendly. His armed personal security never too far behind. This was after all a singer that had somehow survived numerous attempts on his life. Olivas begins to perform a narco corrido and the crowd loves it. Everyone knows the words. The energy is up. Some couples are dancing while groups of women are at the front trying to get Alfredo's attention. But little do they know, well, most people don't, that this popular singer who has run up crazy numbers on YouTube and Spotify also has the ability to, let's say, put some pressure on people in more ways than one. Out of all the Mexican corrido artists climbing the charts, Alfredito Olivas has seen some real ups and downs. From attempts on his life, to being kidnapped, to family members suffering the consequences of being related to a powerful trafficking organization. He has survived some insane situations which would deter other singers from that profession. In the world of corridos, there have been a lot of deaths, probably the most well-known being the legendary Chalino Sanchez, killed by drug traffickers when he returned to Sinaloa for a concert. Alfredito is from the state of Sonora, born on October 1st, 1993. From a young age, he was drawn to music. He began writing songs at the age of 9. He put out his first album at age 12. Back then, he was going by the stage name Alfredito El Sierreño. Around the same time, he received a gift from legendary norteño accordionist and member of Los Tigres del Norte, Raúl Hernández. The gift was a custom-made accordion, an instrument that means a lot to Alfredito, and which he still owns and occasionally performs with. Olivas has stated in past interviews he was inspired by great musicians and composers like Paulino Vargas. One of his first hits was El Patroncito, but the track that got my attention was El Principio del Infierno, roughly translated as the beginning of hell. The lyrics talk about a drug trafficker surviving an ambush and the start of a war of vengeance. At the time, I remember thinking how this kid was able to write a detailed look into the lives of narcos. Soon enough, it would be made clear just how close Alfredito Olivas was to that world. Behind all the awards, millions of views, and adoring fans is an artist that has almost lost his life on more than one occasion. But why so much drama? Well, the truth is, Alfredito isn't just your average kid star. While your dad was being responsible and sensible, Alfredito's dad was helping move drug shipments north like nothing. Alfredito's uncle, El Chapo Trini, was the original boss of the Alfas, the group that controls a large portion of Obregón. They started out with the Beltran Leyvas before linking up with the Caborca cartel. El Chapo Trini had a tight grip on his territory thanks to the hit teams he controlled, but his father and uncle weren't the only connection to narco heavyweights. His former bandmate Regulo Caro is a relative of Rafael Caro Quintero, and according to Regulo Caro, a distant relative that he has never met. Around 2009, Alfredito was now making music with his three friends, Regulo Caro and Tino Acosta, known as Los Tres Mandos. Tracks like Tres Mandos, Herencia Mexicana, and Nuevo Imperio became viral hits on platforms like MySpace and YouTube. Alfredito released a few tracks with the group, but eventually the group broke up since both Alfredito and Regulo Caro's career began to take off. Things were looking good for Alfredito, with rising popularity and a heavy demand for concerts both in Mexico and the US. In 2014, Tito Torbellino, a popular corrido singer, was tragically killed in an ambush in a Sonora restaurant while having lunch with a high-ranking capo working for the Sinaloa cartel. That day, as Tito was chatting with his friend, a squad of gunmen burst through the front entrance and sprayed the table where Tito was sitting. Although he wasn't the target, he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. The hit was ordered by none other than Alfredito's uncle, El Chapo Trini. A year later, it was Alfredito Alfredito's turn to suffer an attempt on his life at one of his concerts. February 2015, Alfredito was performing in Chihuahua. In the middle of performing the romantic ballad Así es esto, he supposedly dedicated it to a woman in the audience, when suddenly a man pulls out a handgun and begins to shoot Olivas. Alfredito was hit, but stayed conscious throughout the ordeal. It would later be discovered the attacker was the woman's boyfriend, and with alcohol in his system, found the gesture by Alfredito a bit too much and decided to empty the magazine. Although some say it was a targeted hit, the gunman was sent by Los Salazar, which at the time were allied with the Sinaloa cartel. Luckily, Alfredito survived the shooting. He was wounded but would make a full recovery. Either way, he wasn't taking any chances. Only a few days after being admitted to the hospital, he checked himself out, aware that rivals routinely show up at hospitals to finish the job. During this time, a brutal war was just beginning to take shape between Los Salazar, a Sinaloa cartel ally, and Los Chapotrinis, both groups battling for control of certain areas of Sonora. Los Alfas, led by Alfredito's uncle, the Chapotrini, versus Los Salazar. Then in 2017, Los Salazar finally caught up to his uncle, while Chapotrini and his family were busy enjoying some street dogs at a corner stand. A BMW X7 and a Mercedes suddenly screeched to a stop right in front of them. Two gunmen got out and began to spray El Chapo with AKs. He never stood a chance. He ended up dying on a street corner in Zapopan, Jalisco. Alfredito was a marked man. His name would appear in a manta. Los Salazar were threatening Los Alfas and Alfredito himself, promising to give him the same fate suffered by their good friend Tito. All the while, Alfredito continued to find success. In 2018, he was nominated for several Billboard Awards for Best Mexican Regional Artist, but his connections to the underworld were never too far away. That same year, his father, Alfredo Olivas Valenzuela, survived an attack by Los Salazar when a hit team arrived at his house in Zapopan. Bodyguards repelled the attack, and Olivas Sr. survived the attack. He was taken to a nearby hospital. Just a few days later, while Olivas Sr. was recovering from the near-successful attack on his life, a second hit team arrived at the hospital in order to finish the job. Los Salazar gunmen entered the hospital and rushed towards his room, only to find his bodyguards ready and waiting. The enemy hit team engaged in a close-quarters shootout inside the hospital. When the shooting stopped, the Salazar gunmen were all dead, and Alfredito's dad had managed to slip away to live another day. However, it would be a different family that would ultimately meet a grisly end in the same city of Zapopan. In 2021, Alfredito's brother, Irving, was driving with his family in a black Escalade. Right before he was about to reach the highway, an unknown vehicle approached the driver's side and began to fire into the SUV. Irving, his wife, and their baby were all killed. The murder of his brother was a huge loss for Alfredito. It was another reminder of the consequences of being part of a narco family. Irving had been arrested years earlier on drug charges, but was released for lack of evidence. Some speculated it had something to do with his old partners, but more than likely it was the Valenzuela's family arch nemesis, the Salazar family. Finally, in 2021, while passing through Zacatecas, it was rumored that Alfredito was kidnapped. For days, no one knew his whereabouts. Rumors began flying online that he had in fact been taken by an armed group. However, Alfredito appeared online days later, clarifying that he was alright and that the rumors were false. When Tito was killed back in 2014, he left behind a son, was by now making waves himself. He carried on his father's legacy, so in 2019, Alfredito and Tito Jr. ended up performing together on stage. Many say that this performance was interesting for the fact that during the performance of Barba Negra, one of Tito's hit songs, his son all of a sudden launched an indirect line at Alfredito. Many speculate that Tito's son knew perfectly well that it was Alfredito's family that sent the people that ended up killing his father. Since then, Tito Jr. had written and recorded songs for the Salazar family. Songs like El H are dedicated to slain boss Edgar Villegas, who was killed by a lone gunman while getting a haircut. Tito Jr. was now locked in with the Salazar mob, and it was obvious he and Alfredito were on opposite sides. Alfredito was in the crosshairs, but so far he managed to avoid any serious reprisals against him. He himself has claimed that he has moved away from narco corridos and now almost exclusively puts out romantic ballads. In an interview, he explained that what made him change the subject matter was the birth of his first son. Alfredito continues to put out music and has become a popular and in-demand performer. He routinely sells out large venues. His videos gain millions of views, and he is one of the top Mexican artists, crushing it on Spotify and YouTube. And while he has so far managed to survive the drug wars of Sonora, he remains cautious, knowing full well that in the drug world, his father's sins can and will be used against him. For now, he continues to climb the ladder of success, just like Tito Jr. He views the Valenzuelas as wholly responsible for the death of his father back in 2014. Alfredito Olivas, the maestro of corridos and the voice of a generation, didn't just rise to fame. He carved his name into the wall of music history, from the humble streets of Sonora to the grandest stages across the Americas. His lyrics became the anthem of the streets, his melodies the soundtrack of both triumph and tragedy. With every note, he painted the raw, unfiltered truth of life, love, and loss, earning the loyalty of millions and the respect of kingpins. Through it all, he keeps rising. Even with the close calls and his family members' demise, Alfredito doesn't just sing about the life of a king, he lives it, ruling not with fear, but with the unshakable power of his art. Only time will tell if he makes it to old age or succumbs to the long reach of his enemies.